Welcome to the Ed Leaders Edge podcast, where we interview innovators and thought leaders in the field of education who are helping students thrive. I'm your host, Ed Madison. I'm a professor and researcher at the University of Oregon, an educational consultant, and serve as executive director of the Journalistic Learning Initiative, a nonprofit organization that empowers elementary, middle, and high school students to discover their voice, improve academic outcomes, and become self-directed learners through project-based storytelling. Welcome to our program. Welcome back to the podcast. Michael Cornell is school superintendent of the Hamburg Central School District in Hamburg, New York. He's also president of the Erie, Niagara School Superintendents Association, and he's an executive coach and educational consultant. Michael, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I want to start by talking about a topic that I think is top of mind for most educators and administrators right now, which is mental health, student mental health. And I know you're doing some really focused and intentional work there that I'd love for you to share about.
Yeah, so we started down our journey really in 2017-18. We had an opportunity to get a grant from the Peter Tower Foundation out here in Western New York. Hamburg, New York is right near where the Buffalo Bills play. In fact, my office is on Abbott Road, and Abbott Road is where the Buffalo Bills play as well, about 2 miles down the road. And the Peter Tower Foundation is here in Western New York, and they were offering grants to do youth mental health first aid. And we recognized in 2017 that we had a mental health crisis in our country, and that mental health crisis was crashing in on our schools every single day. And one of the things that became abundantly clear was that we had a lot, just educators who start, like I'm a mid-90s starting educator. I started teaching in 1994, and we were not focused on the mental health of our kids. We're there for kids. We love our kids, but we weren't as attuned to their mental health. And we thought it was really important to put something in place that would make it abundantly clear that every single adult who worked in our school had an important role to play in looking out for the mental health of our kids. And one of the ways to do that is Youth Mental Health First Aid, which is an accredited program. And we started down that road by bringing our school-based mental health professionals in and asking them if they thought it was a good idea to pursue it, and they did. And then we had to train some of our trainers. So we chose to train 10 of our people, and they are now accredited Youth Mental Health First Aid trainers. So then we took the 2018-19 school year. Again, this is pre-COVID. 2018-19 school year and trained every single one of our 625 employees in youth mental health first aid. So a full day training. We did all that in 1 year. And that includes our bus drivers. We have a private busing company, but we trained them as well. So they have 100 or so employees. So we trained 725 employees in a year in an accredited youth mental health first aid program. And people were not thrilled at first to spend a full day away from their time with kids or whatever their work was for the school to come and do this because it was new. Nobody else was doing it. And by the end of the training, invariably, people were like, oh my God, you know what? I wasn't, excited to come, but now that I sat through this thing, like it is wonderful. And, I give enormous credit to our staff for embracing it. And we've recertified everybody because the certification is only good for 3 years.
And what are you seeing in terms of results for the students?
Well, what's interesting is it's hard to measure in some ways because you're trying to measure it, in the absence of things, right? You're trying to measure things in terms of what hasn't happened. But generally speaking, we, like coming out of COVID, people were talking about massive discipline problems and, large numbers of suspensions and things like that. We did not have a significant number of suspensions. The behavior of our kids was really rather good. We see a lot more traffic down to the counseling office because what happens is if, I'm a social studies teacher and I see a young person who I believe is experiencing some symptom of a mental or emotional illness or distress, I'm gonna ask Michael to stick around for a minute after class or somehow engage him in a way that preserves his dignity. And I'm gonna say, you missed your homework a couple days, or you made a comment in class that didn't seem quite like you. Is everything all right? Anything you think that I can help you with? And sometimes they'll say, no, man, I'm good. But if tomorrow another teacher says the same thing, and maybe it's a teacher that person feels more comfortable with, they might say, my dad left the house Thursday and it's Tuesday and I don't know what's going to happen. And my
Mm-hmm.
head's on that and it's not really on school right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say, well, have you talked to your school counselor or social worker about that? Well, no, I don't even, I've never needed that before. So I don't really know who that person is. Well, can I walk you down? Let me walk you down there and I'm going to introduce you to Mrs. La Mendola and maybe you guys can have a chat. And then right there, you're connecting the child to resources that he may need, brings the family into the picture around it. And sometimes it's more around, their sufferings from symptoms of depression or anxiety or, when we dig into those things. So it's been an absolute game changer and it makes it explicit that it is the job of every one of our adults in our school to look out for the mental and emotional well-being of all of our kids. And, the problem of mental health in our kids is way too complex and vast for four school counselors, two social workers, and a psychologist, and three administrators to address. That's just a fact.
Yeah.
So now it's everybody working together because we have the same mindset around making sure that all of our kids are mentally and emotionally well. And we all know that if kids are not mentally and emotionally well, you can have the best math lesson known to man or, an absolute, showstopper of a music lesson. But if kids are not mentally and emotionally well, it really doesn't matter how good that experience is you're going to plan for kids.
Let's step away from our conversation for a moment for me to tell you about the Journalistic Learning Initiative's innovative educational tools and services. If you're looking to make the best decision for your teaching staff and students about AI adoption, improving student engagement, strengthening writing skills, promoting social media mindfulness, or enhancing college and career readiness, please take a moment to visit our website at journalisticlearning.org. Our team of University of Oregon researchers offer customized AI tools, instructional materials, professional development, and consulting. Research confirms that students with journalistic learning experience outperform their peers on numerous key indicators for college and career readiness. At the heart of our work is empowering learners to become effective communicators. If you think about it, effective communication is critical in every human interaction, whether it's writing an essay for a grade or being interviewed to secure employment. Since 2015, JLI has benefited nearly 20,000 students and served schools in 15 states and the District of Columbia. I invite you to schedule an appointment to explore how JLI can improve your students' learning outcomes. Now back to our program. Now you talk about three words: joy, value, and connection. Tell me more about that and those kind of pillars that inform the work that you do.
So they're first and foremost absolutely critical human needs. We all need joy in our lives, not just happy moments, but joy. We all need to feel valued and do things that we think allow us to add value to others. We all need to feel connected as humans, connected, like in the school setting, connected to our classmates, our colleagues, students feeling connected to the adults at school, feeling connected to the school more generally and to the school community. When you look at the learning literature, there's a great quote that I used on opening day a couple of years ago where they studied children and the role that boredom plays and look at some of the developmental psychology and the physiology of the brain. And the conclusion that was arrived at through this one study is that boredom for kids is actually poisonous to their brain. So there's got to be a sense of curiosity and fun. We know just from the brain research that when we're all, any of us, any human, when you're experiencing something joyful, you're more open to the experience. You're more open to outside information. You're better able to adapt to things when you're in a joyful frame of mind. We know that when kids see value in the learning that they're getting in school, if it connects to who they are and they feel valued through it, that's really important. And just having connection. That's why the conversations about taking certain books out of libraries and, because it might acknowledge an experience a child has that's different than somebody else's experience. They want to pull those books out of libraries. Well, that's the exact opposite of the type of connection we want our kids to experience in schools, and the type of value that we want them to see in the learning and the literature and the other resources that we bring to bear in our schools. So, I think that's an absolutely critical part of the school experience. And it can't just be a one-off. Like, the kids should experience a significant measure of joy, value, and connection every single day as a feature of the school day, not a byproduct of one cool lesson on one day, or one kid or one adult who is nice to them on one day. But they should walk into school and really feel a sense of belonging. A lot of it comes from, if you've ever read Dan Coyle, The Culture Code, there are belonging cues that we all as humans pick up. Do I feel safe here? Do I feel like I have a future here? Do I feel loved and cared for here? A couple of years ago, we spent time in our administrative retreat trying to make sure that we made it abundantly clear that every child who walks in our school every single day should feel loved. Yeah. People are afraid to use that word in school because it has different connotations, but sure. We're unabashed about it. We want every kid to walk in school and feel loved. There's a study done at Yale. The top 1% of people, they asked Yale freshmen, what do they want most out of life? To feel loved.
Yeah.
So
that's an important
feature of what we do.
A lot of my research, I cite something called self-determination theory, and one of the three pillars of that is relatedness, which is very similar to this sort of sense of belonging. I know also the word flourishing is sort of through positive psychology is getting resonance, in education right now as well. Let me talk to you about how you juxtapose those priorities against sort of the standardized testing and high stakes testing that can feel like anything but love, but just like a lot of pressure.
Yeah. So when I started here as superintendent 10 years ago, and that was in the midst here in New York State anyway of an annual professional performance review process that was not at all research based. It was the value added model that was proven in New York State Supreme Court anyway to be arbitrary and capricious, because there was no research to support the fact that you could somehow disentangle the contributions of one teacher from the other 7 teachers as it relates to a student's increase in a ELA assessment score from 3rd grade to 4th grade, which seems like we shouldn't have needed to settle that in court because it sounds foolish on its face. However, that's what we had to do in New York State, unfortunately. So it's in the midst of all of that foolishness, with a focus on external measures based on high-stake testing for kids. And I told the board when I interviewed, I said, you're not going to hear me talk about increasing test scores. You're not going to hear me talk about increasing graduation rates. We're going to talk about the things that really matter to a child's school experience. Do they feel loved in school? Do they feel valued in school? This is before I was talking about joy, value, and connection in that concise way. This is me as a middle school principal, interviewing for a superintendency and having a very strong sense that we were going down the wrong path in terms of our policy prescriptions from Albany, and knowing just from my 20 plus years as a teacher and a principal that there are a whole list of things that matter a ton about the child's school experience, and they will show up on any assessment score you want to give them at some point. So I said, we're not going to talk about graduation rates, but I wouldn't be surprised if at some point we have the highest graduation rate in Western New York. Now, to be fair, we were hovering around the 90s. So it's not like we were 75 and we got to 95. Like, I don't want to give myself too much credit here.
Right.
But there's a lot of very affluent schools in Western New York who have all the socioeconomic advantages you would imagine. And we're not a high wealth district by any stretch. So we went from like the low 90s to 96, 97%. And the last year before COVID, we had the highest graduation rate in Western New York with some very high performing, very high socioeconomic, low need schools. And it's the only time I've talked about graduation rates.
That's terrific. Yeah.
So I think in our view, and I think the data has borne it out, if you focus on the stuff that really matters in the life of a child, How they perform on assessments will take care of itself, because really those assessment scores, they're nice ways to measure the result of our efforts, but they can never be the focus of our efforts.
Right. So you're retiring in late at the end of this year. I'm just curious, as you reflect on, just your all your years in education, what do you know now that you think that maybe incoming administrators could benefit from hearing?
So I do talks often for people who want to be school superintendents. So interestingly, the joy, value, and connection frame holds up for people who want to be. You want to be a school superintendent? You've got to take joy in certain things, right? You've got to take joy in being challenged. You've got to take joy in overcoming barriers. You've got to be happy with who you are as a person on the inside before you step into that role. Because if either you're going to step into that role, and because of all the amazing things you do, people are going to sprinkle rose petals on your path to your office, you're going to find yourself, a fairly unhappy person in your job. So you've got to find your own sense of joy and your own sense of purpose before you even step into that role. And then understand that you're going to have to take joy in the little victories. You're not going to show up into the superintendency or in a principalship for that matter, and you're going to have this great big change that everybody's going to embrace and the whole school or school district is going to be different. You've got to take joy in being 1% better next week, and being patient and persistent. You've got to have a sense of your own values and have a sense for doing everything you can to add value to other people. Your job as a leader is to pour into others and make sure that they feel valued as humans and as professionals. Because if you can't do that for them, I don't think you're at all useful to them as a leader. And you've got to be connected. Like I'm in my office now. I've spent, a decent part of my day in my office, which is not usual.
Yeah.
We have 180 or 85 days in a school year in New York State. There might be 20 of those days when I don't spend a substantial amount of time in a school. Pre-K through 12, we have 6 schools, 4 elementary schools, middle school, and high school. And like the high school in particular, I'm there at least a couple of days a week for an hour at a time. The more you lead outside of your office, the less you have to manage in your office. So I spent a lot of time connecting with the teachers and kids. I mean, that's where the work is. Any good CEO spends her or his time where the work actually happens. So, you take advantage of those touch points that when you're out there, they get to know who you are, what's in your heart. You get to find out about them and their family and what's important to them. And you build those really strong connections. 'Cause without that, you're somewhat disconnected. But Abraham Lincoln, even during the heart of the Civil War, the heat of the Civil War, used to go walk Washington, D.C., even when he literally had a target on his back. And he said those public opinion baths, that he called them, were absolutely critical to his ability to lead at a difficult time. So, being connected as a leader is absolutely important. And too often people get into the superintendency either thinking they can't be around teachers or kids, or do it because they'd rather not be connected to teachers and kids. So I do everything I can to just point people to those things. And I think I knew them somewhat intuitively, but, I don't know that I was able to appreciate in the moment just how important those things would be. And being able to stay in a school district for 10 years when the average length of tenure for a superintendent in New York State in any single district is 3.5 years. And I stayed in Hamburg for 10, and, I've loved it. A lot of credit goes to a board who was willing to take the ride on things like joy, value, and connection. Our strategic plan, we don't have numeric goals. We have commitments. And that language is purposeful because, I'm as committed to those goals and to our kids as everybody else is. There's not an asymmetry in our system that you find in other places when people are responsible to the superintendent for a set of, external accountability goals that really don't matter much to how kids learn.
Yeah.
So I guess that's what I would say.
I want to ask you about AI, how you're looking at it in your district, what you're seeing, and thoughts about that.
I think it was April or May, I walked into one of my 5th grade classrooms, and Typically I walk in, I have a seat and, just ask them what are you guys doing? I sat next to a kid and they were using AI to write us. So there was like the story arc, right? So just as a fun way to approach it. This wasn't like the only way they were learning it. Like we're not just teaching kids to write stories using AI,
right.
But just for fun, they said, here's what I want you to do. Create the plot, the setting, the challenge,
right.
And what you think the outcome will be.
Right.
Plug it into AI and see what AI does.
Yeah.
And they would prompt it because the secret to AI is the prompting, right?
Right.
So they prompted AI to write the story.
Yeah.
They had the length in there and everything else.
Right.
So you got the story. Then they would use the AI to draw a couple of illustrations. So if you've ever tried to use AI to prompt it to draw something, that's a skill all on its own, separate from the prompting to try to get AI to write a story that follows this particular pattern.
Right.
So then they add that. And then they asked AI, based on the mood of the story, at different points in the story, to compose music. So, and these kids are 10. So, I'm old enough, I've been around long enough to remember when Google came on the scene. Right. And it was, oh my God, nobody's going to have to learn anything. They're just going to go on Google. That's it. The school as we know it is going to be over. And, this is, it's a more powerful tool by like 100,000, to one. Right. But the reality of it is it's going to be a part of our lives. We're going to have to adapt to it and with it. And if we don't help our kids do that, then we're doing them a disservice. And a lot of it's just helping our teachers and giving them permission and the professional learning that they need to help our kids do it and giving them time. It takes 3 to 5 years to incorporate anything new into your practice.
Right.
So, just saying, look, guys, we get it. It's going to be a bit and it's okay. And we're here to help you.
Great. Thank you so much, Michael. Where can people find information about your district or your work or your consulting?
I'm on LinkedIn. You can look me up on LinkedIn. That's an easy way to do it.
Okay.
HamburgSchools.org. mcornell304@gmail is my business for now. Like I'm in the infant stages of this. Like I'm a little busy with my day job to try to build a business. But for coaching and I do talks on all kinds of things. I'm do keynotes for leadership programs and things like that. So
terrific,
fun stuff.
All right, thank you so much.
The Ed Leader's Edge podcast is produced by the Journalistic Learning Initiative.
Please check out our latest books, Language Arts in Action from W.W. Norton Publishing, and Raising Empowered Learners from Rauman and Littlefield.
For more information about our work, please visit journalisticlearning.org or edleaderedge.org. Thanks for listening.